Break the wheel. Make it stop.
Hello again, gentle viewers, and welcome back to The Broken Wheel. Before I finish the last 2 episodes of Season 1, I wanted to finish my trilogy on the Aes Sedai. This third video on the Servants of All will go over the history of the Aes Sedai. Medium spoiler warnings for this video will reveal certain past events that have not been talked about in the TV show. I can't say to what extent, for Amazon has rejected my resume as a scriptwriter. But with all that said, let our journey begin again. Prior to the breaking of the world, roughly 3,000 years before the start of the series, humanity existed in a golden age of knowledge, community, and peace. This was aided greatly by the Aes Sedai of the time that used the One Power to better all members of society. It is theorized that the great feats of the time were made possible by men and women using the One Power together. Although many talents that existed in the time of legends, as it's called in modern time, are now extinct as well, leaving only the names of them in ancient books. The more academic of the modern Aes Sedai often debate on what these talents, like weaving earth fire and milking tears, may have actually done. A major difference in being Aes Sedai in ancient times is that it didn't need to be your sole pursuit in life. I get the impression that the Aes Sedai order was much like the Red Cross. People who could channel would volunteer their abilities when called upon, but most often had day jobs. There was much prestige in being Aes Sedai, but only a minority were Aes Sedai full-time. The exception to this were people skilled at healing, as powerful restorers, as they were called at the time, could simply do far more than medical science. Those Aes Sedai that distinguished themselves with their good works would be honored with a third name. The previous dragon who sealed the Dark One was born Lews Therin, but later given the third name Telamon. The Aes Sedai were governed by a body called the Hall of Servants, who were led by the first among servants. If a need arose for the Aes Sedai to mobilize, they would form an Aja to address it. It seems the word Aja was a simple noun in that time as opposed to the proper noun in the modern era. These Ajas were temporary and disbanded when its purpose was completed. Nothing is known about the Aes Sedai training, but at least one of the Forsaken describes it as having to maintain focus under grueling conditions. These included under stress, great distraction, and physical pain. While it is certain that others held the title before him, Lews Therin Telamon is the only person known to be the first among servants. This position allowed him to call the 9 Rods of Dominion, who were a type of provincial governors, though modern Aes Sedai think these rods were some sort of items of power. The first symbol of office was the Ring of Tamerlane. There are many legends about this ring and what it could do, but nothing is known for certain. It's often thought that the title Amerlin's Seat is derived from this ring. When the crisis of the Dark One came, starting what would be called the War of Power, the Hall of Servants would take control of the war effort and place Lews Therin in overall command of the forces of the light. However, as the war dragged on, it became apparent that the forces of the light would lose in a drawn-out campaign and that decisive action was needed to achieve victory. Though Lews Therin was technically the supreme commander, there was little other command structure within the Light's forces, and the Light's generals soon fell into a deadlock on how to defeat the Dark One's armies. Eventually, 2 plans of action arose that had the best potential to defeat the Shadow. The one proposed by Lews Therin Telamon was to assemble a circle of the most powerful Aes Sedai and journey to Shayal Ghul. There they would link together and force the Dark One out of reality altogether and seal its prison with 7 seals. However, this plan had considerable risk, as whomever journeyed to Shayal Ghul would be placing themselves at great peril, having to fight their way through armies of shadow spawn. Also, if the process of sealing the Dark One was not precisely done, it could completely free the Dark One instead of sealing it. The other plan, strongly supported by a woman named Latra Dakum, hope I said that right, was to construct 2 giant Sa'angreals, one for Saidar and one for Saidin. Together, enough of the one power could be wielded to totally destroy the Dark One's forces and erect a barrier around Shayol Ghul to permanently contain it. The Dark One would still exist in the world, but only in its mountain prison. While this was considered safer, there was great concern about creating such powerful weapons as they had the destructive capability to destroy the entire planet. It was also thought that over time the Dark One would slowly chip away at its prison until it failed. The debate on which plan to use polarized the Hall of Servants, mostly along gender lines. Latra Posebdakum, the most powerful woman, Aes Sedai of the time, persuaded all female Aes Sedai to oppose Luz Theron's plan in an agreement known as the Fateful Concord. Unable to form the circle that Luz Theron would need without women, the Hall approved the creation of the Sa'angreals, or the Chodan Kal, as they would become known, and construction began. However, the rift between male and female Aes Sedai continued to grow. As the Chodan Kal neared completion, the construction site was attacked by the Dark One's forces. Unknown to the Shadowsworn, Ter'angreal keys were needed to use the Chodan Kal as a safeguard. While the Dark One's channelers were not able to use the power of the two Sa'angreals, the keys were lost in the chaos of the battle. The Aes Sedai made several attempts to retrieve the keys, but none succeeded. Using his position as Supreme Commander of the Forces of the Light, Luz Theron Telamon circumvented the Hall of Servants and assembled a force to march on Shayol Ghul. Without the aid of any women, Luz Theron set out with 113 male Aes Sedai and a, quote, honor guard of 10,000 soldiers. This force of men would be called the 100 Companions, even though there were more than 100. I guess the 113 Companions wasn't as catchy. The strike against the Dark One proved to be successful, as Shaitan was resealed in its prison and the 13 Forsaken were sealed as well as a bonus. However, in the process of imprisoning the Dark One, it was necessary to expose it directly to Saidin, which allowed the Dark One to taint the male half of the true source. Without the aid of women using Saidar, the Seven Seals were imperfect and weaker than if both halves of the true source were used. This defect would allow the Dark One to erode the seals over time and eventually destroy them one by one. Due to the severe chaos and destruction of the times, it is unclear exactly how long the breaking of the world and the following time of madness lasted. We do know that it is somewhere between 239 and 344 years. As people started to rebuild, a new After Breaking, or AB, calendar was started that was used until the end of the Trolloc Wars, 1,350 years later. The female Aes Sedai that remained were fractured into many groups, each claiming to be the true Aes Sedai. One of the largest had gathered at a river island that had been made during the breaking that would become Tar Valon. In 47 AB, the 12 largest of these groups would be called together to unify the Aes Sedai once more. This gathering would also be where the decision was made to make Tar Valon their new headquarters and have the White Tower constructed. During the next 50 years, the Aes Sedai would ruthlessly subjugate all other groups of women channelers, giving them the choice of joining or being stilled. In 98 AB, Elisane Tishar, the matriarch of the modern Aes Sedai and a legend of the White Tower, was elevated as the first Amyrlin seat. Elisane would have an advisory council of 7 women aside from the now Hall of the Tower, that are believed to have been the founders of the modern 7 Ajas. It's believed that other Ajas may have also existed during this time, but were either disbanded or absorbed into the 7 largest ones. Meetings with these advisors were often called sittings, which is still in use to this day, and most likely where the title of sitter came from. This year would also see the beginning of the construction of the White Tower and city of Tar Valon. Construction would be completed in the year 202 AB. The Aes Sedai helped oversee the establishment of new nations during this time. By 209 AB, the 10 nations would sign the Compact of the 10 Nations, a mutual defense agreement that would see trade and peace flourish for almost 800 years. The compact was largely brought together by Queen Mabrium and Sherid of Aramele, which would later be split into the modern kingdoms of Arafel, Shinar, and Malkir. Mabrium was also a powerful Aes Sedai of the Grey Aja, though she was never made Armelin. 1000 AB would see the end of this time of peace with the beginning of the Trolloc Wars. This was a series of conflicts against armies of Shadowspawn led by Dreadlords, men and women servants of the Dark One that could channel. I guess the Dark One rejected the name Dreadladies. After 350 years of war, the Dark One's armies were eventually driven back into the Blight, but at great cost. 5 of the 10 nations were in ruins, and the surviving 5 would splinter not long after. For the Aes Sedai, a deep rift of distrust had grown between the White Tower and the people of the Westlands for the deposed Amyrlin seat's betrayal of Manetheren, modern-day Two Rivers. Tetsuan of the Red Aja had a long-time jealousy of the Queen of Manetheren's strength of the One Power and delayed reinforcements to the Mountain Kingdom until it was too late. When this was brought to light, the Hall of the Tower had her removed and stilled, the first Amyrlin seat to be stripped of staff and stole. It appears that the second of the 3 oaths that all modern Aes Sedai take on the Tear Angreal, the Oath Rod, was in place after the War of Power. This oath prevents the Aes Sedai from using the One Power to make any deadly weapons. After seeing what devastation could be wrought by such endeavors, the Aes Sedai agreed to never make anything like them again. It's worth noting that taking any oaths on the Oath Rod shortens one's lifespan. The first ones to swear this oath knew this and did so anyway. Though they still had a much longer life than people who can't channel, it still shows how strongly their conviction was. This knowledge was lost over the centuries, with modern Aes Sedai being completely unaware. The oaths to speak the truth and not use the One Power as a weapon except in self-defense or against Shadowspawn did not come into place until after the end of the Trolloc Wars in 1350 AB. This was done to build trust with the people of the Westlands that had soured over the centuries. In the TV series, Rand makes a brief comment that the 3 oaths were a concession the Aes Sedai made with Arthur Hawkwing, the last High King. This might be a change that the show's writers are taking, for Arthur Hawkwing was born almost 1,000 years after the 3 oaths were adopted. The years after the Trolloc Wars would be known as the Free Years, starting a new calendar. The White Tower would see itself put under the control of a non-Aes Sedai for the first time when Arthur Pendrag Tanriel, the Hawkwing, was named High King in 963 FY. This would continue until his death in 994 FY, and his empire would shatter in the conflict over succession, the War of 100 Years, which lasted for 130 years. I guess they really like naming things with 100. Again, due to the chaos of the time, it is not known when the War of 100 Years came to an end. The New Era calendar would start here and is the one used at the start of the series. The Aes Sedai's reputation and influence would continue to decline, especially with the rise of anti-Aes Sedai organizations such as the Children of the Light in 1021 FY. The Aes Sedai tried to hold together the unity that was sparked by the Aiel War, which lasted from 976 to 978 NE, but to no avail. The White Tower would then face its greatest crisis in 978 NE, with the knowledge that the dragon had been reborn and the approach of Tarmangeddon, the last battle. I hope you've enjoyed this video and found it informative. I had planned on adding more about modern Aes Sedai decorum and ceremony, but this video has gone on much longer than I wanted, and that stuff can be kind of dry. If you're interested in me making a video on that, please let me know in the comments below. As always, please consider liking and subscribing to help the channel grow. And also, may the light be with you.